Started. So welcome to another show. Today we have Dr. Lynda Ulrich, who is a host to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, as well as the creator of the Goodness Exchange, who's also been a 3 times TEDx talker and is an author. So welcome to today's show, Lynda.
I'm delighted to be here, Javon.
So from just that introduction alone, we can see that you are a force for positive change in the world and looking at the good that can come of things. Can you sort of expand on that a little bit and talk about the reasons why you have started both the podcast and also the exchange that has got a vast array of positive material on there?
Yeah, so I am, but I was a dentist for about 20 years when I started the Goodness Exchange, and the reason for that was because I started noticing that the social media and the overwhelming negative narrative in the news was just really starting to get my patients down in like 2011, 2012, 2013. And I kept saying, somebody's got to do something about this. Somebody's got to do something about this, because I'm well read and I traveled all over the world and I'd seen the best in humanity so much, so often. And I knew that if all most people knew was what we see on the screens in our lives, we were never going to believe in each other or the future. And so one day, a number of things happened, all in order, like often happens. And that day, I stopped saying somebody's got to do something about this, and I said it was going to be me. So since then, a team and I have written thousands of articles, published thousands of links and interviews and so forth to all the good that's happening in the world. So people would have some trustworthy access with no agenda to what's right with the world. So we have no politics, never have touched advertising or anything like that. We're just trying to shine a light on what's right with the world.
To be fair, I love that in terms of finding a problem or saying that, well, there's something that's not being done, who's going to do it, and actually taking it upon yourself to provide the solution. And I think that is where a lot of ideas come from. It's like, well, I need to find X, Y, and Z. It's not there. I've got two options. One is I can either complain or I can be the person who did that. And I actually did that with my book as well, but I'm going to brush over that. Anyway, the other thing that I like is that, as you've rightly said, if you see negative things in the news, you are more likely to have a negative perspective, which means that you're more likely to act in a negative way as opposed to the positive side. So have you noticed a change in the people who, because I'm sure that friends, family, your colleagues have all started to read your literature. Have you noticed a change in their attitude as well, just from reading that?
Yeah, and I think it's part of have you ever had a friend that just went on a health kick and you hadn't seen him for 6 months, and when you saw him you may barely have recognized them?
Yeah.
I think that our worldview can be changed just the same. Like, we're so worried about how we look to the external world, and we're going to the gym and doing all the things with our nails and all the stuff. And many of us are seeking ways to have better mental health these days. So we've got our physical health down. Now we're worried about our mental health. And I think our worldview ought to be just as important as those other two, because the worldview is how you make decisions every day. You either make decisions from a position of fear, or you make decisions from a position of love and curiosity. And if your worldview is stunted by this way over it, we're just being overwhelmed by all the negative news in the world. If your worldview is stunted by that, you can't help it but be different in your life and your everyday recommendations to your kids or your coworkers or what have you. But if you can change your worldview, you are just as radiant a person in other people's lives, um, as and as important a change maker as you could ever be. And that's valuable to your working environment and your family and your friends and everyone.
Yeah, it's definitely it's like the phrase a mountain is climbed with a single step, or a single step basically combats a mountain. I look at a life in the same respect. You know, if you have a bad day, that turns into a bad week, a bad month, a bad quarter, a bad year, and obviously a bad decade and a bad life. And what you're saying is that if you are reading bad news and you then have the victim mentality, you're going to have a bad day. And if you do that over a period of time, you're unrecognizable from someone who maybe looks at the positive side of things and seeing the positive in what people can do. Because at the end of the day, even ourselves and yourself, everything that you've got, someone else is jealous of. You know, you've been a TEDx speaker, you've got your own show, you've got your own goodness exchange, you're an author, you have got a lovely photo of a panda in the background, and the everything you have, you've got to be grateful for. And for those people who maybe are reading the negative news, they then can have a hatred towards society themselves, which puts them in a negative spiral. Is that what your ambition was, to try and reverse that trend? Because as you said, the mainstream narrative, the agenda is negative news. Look how bad the world is, murder, if it bleeds it reads, and all that sort of stuff. Were you trying to be the change in that spiral?
So there's one thing that a thought leader taught me long time ago that I focus on almost every day, is what we give our attention to expands. It's the way it works with credit card debt and the animosities we might have with our teenager and the friction we may have with our boss, right? If we give all our attention over to those friction points, the friction expands. And the same is true of what we give our attention to on the screens in our lives. It's a reality. It's not only just a mindset, it's a reality. Your algorithms are going to serve you more of what you chose last. That's it. So if you're clicking on negative news, that's all the choices that you're giving your algorithm. That's what's going to give you back. But also just intellectually and emotionally, if we just give over all our attention to what's wrong in our lives or in the wider world or what have you, we become that person who just looks for what's wrong.
Yeah,
You got to have evidence. You got to seek evidence that there's something good out there.
I love that analogy, the algorithm analogy, because the more negative news we look at on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, whatever it is, the algorithm suggests more of that stuff. And I
Yes.
think that's a great metaphor for life in general. If we see negative stuff in life, we
Yes.
the algorithm of life gives us more of that as well. So I think that's a really great analogy, because for all the listeners out there, you can probably go onto your YouTube channel and see what type of videos you're being recommended, and that'll probably give you an insight as to what type of person you are or what content you'd be watching.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so as far as the goodness exchange goes, what type of, because positive and goodness are very vague words, aren't they? What
Mm.
specifically, content wise, does the exchange have on? Does it have, for example, people turning around their health, people starting businesses and succeeding, the good, sustainable developments going around the world, or is it a combination of all that, but with the undertone of being something positive?
Yeah, that's one of the things that's made the endeavor quite hard, is because everyone is always telling us, find your niche audience, find your niche audience. And that's one thing about what we've done with the Goodness Exchange. I've refused to play the games of the internet right from day one. I said, if I can't do this without playing all the games, without having the hype and the finding my niche audience and constantly doing outrageous things for them, if I can't make this work without all that, then I'm not gonna put my shoulder towards that door. But the answer to your question is that when so I am absolutely rigorous about my this understanding that what I give my attention to, I will get more of. So I say for 10 years, I'm as curious about the blobfish on the Weather Channel as anyone else, but I will not click on it. you know, you see a picture of an anaconda with a human form in it, and you just want to click on that so bad. No, I don't. I don't click on ads. I don't click on social media. I would never in a million years click on some back and forth of politics that people are doing. Even if they're on my side and they're saying they're winning, I won't click on it, because we get more of what we click on. This seems like a good point for me to share the 4 shifts. Would you like me to do that, Javon? The
Absolutely.
4 shifts? Okay. All right. So when I started in this journey in 2013, I was an ordinary web user. Okay, I was pretty good at creating web content. I started the first dental website in my area by miles. I wrote a 300-page website in 2004. So okay, I was a little bit on the edge out there, but really, buy a pair of boots, see what my sister's new puppy looks like. That's where I was with the internet. And what I've learned over the last 10 years, I'd really love to share with people, because we can reduce this down to 4 simple shifts that will help you see an entirely different world in your lives. Just keep remembering that what you see is only a slice of reality because of what you've clicked on in the past. So here are the 4 shifts. First, all you have to do to start changing all this negativity that you see on the screens of your life is pause. Pause before you give your attention to anything, because someone is counting every click you make. Your click is a vote for more of whatever you're giving your attention to in that minute. When you're scrolling at lunch and you're clicking, and you're scrolling at lunch and clicking, you're eating your sandwich, scrolling and clicking, every single one of those clicks is a vote for more of that.
So what you're saying is then, because we'll talk about these individually. So you're saying
Yeah.
that we need to be conscious, and in order to be
Yes.
conscious about the decisions we're making, we need to pause in order to reflect about the
That's it.
decisions
Just
we are
pause.
making and how that impact that is having on, as you said, the votes and what that is promoting as far as the global and more specifically to yourself as an audience.
Yes. Pause before you click on anything. And when I say click, I mean a swipe, a tap, a like, even, some algorithms are trained to just notice where our eyes are falling. So pause before you click on anything, and then ask yourself, do we really need more of that? That's all I do all day long. I see things that are like shiny objects all over the internet too. Not as many as most, because I've trained my algorithms by now, but still, just pause. And that's how I say, do we need more of that? Whether it's a fight on the internet or some bad comment in at the bottom of a recipe or whatever, I do not give my attention to things that we don't need more of. And then the second step is ignore more. Ignore 80% of what you used to just click on out of A, B, C. I give people something to think of. Don't click out of A, B, or C mode. Anger, boredom, or morbid curiosity. Just don't. A, B, C. Anger, boredom, or curiosity. If you're giving something on the internet your attention out of one of those 3 modes, that's what you're going to get more of, and it's likely to be negative. So pause is the first one. Ignore more is the second. The third is seek signs of goodness and progress. Remember, all that our algorithms are shortcuts. So they were, believe it or not, as bad as algorithms seem to be these days, they were invented to be a shortcut, to be helpful. So if you liked only content about Brittany Spaniels, you'd see more of it, or what have you. So when you seek signs of goodness and progress, when you go to our website and just make it a habit every single day, or there are other wonderful positive places for content, Smithsonian, NASA, find your niche, go there a lot. If once your algorithm's seeing that that's what you give your attention to, it will serve you more of that. And remember that the fourth shift is, and when you find positive things, share them. The fourth shift is share. So it's pause, ignore more, seek signs of goodness for progress, and share it. Because no one is making content that we won't stick with and share. Nobody cares about likes anymore. On the internet now, the big thing is shares. So, if you see that negative post on social media about some political thing, no matter how bad you care about it,
Yeah, it's
sharing
like,
it
as
is
you
the
said,
worst possible thing you could do.
that the energy, where your attention goes, your energy flows. But I think some of the problems
Yes.
can stem from the fact that the loser mindset is that if I'm not successful, I don't want anyone else to be successful. And I think that's the issue, because a lot of people have this where they see something good and like they have a negative attitude towards someone being successful, and they are unlikely to share that. But if someone's fell over and has demoralized themselves and put themselves in the worst position, they're happy to share that. But what they don't realize is they are doing the same thing to themselves by sharing bad or good things. if you are happy for other people and you're elevating other people, you are more likely to elevate yourself. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. You know, uh, we are what we give our attention to. We are what we share these days. I mean, if you agree that we used to have just a personal life and a working life, and now we have a digital life, then that's 1/3 of our existence at least. And it's important that we show up there with the same kind of person we want to be for our families, that we want to be for in our work environments. We don't want to be that hateful person that just spreads negativity in our wake. At work, we want to be the considered the thoughtful one, the idea person. And you get that way when you change your worldview.
Yeah, I mean, we've all got friends, haven't we, that always look at the negative. And Jim Rohn's got a really good phrase around this. He says, "Imagine you're sitting in front of a window, and it's the most beautiful view you've ever seen out of the window. Don't be the person who complains about the specks on the window, because out of everything good, you're that one person who brings up that one, the bird poo or a speck on the window. When there's so much to focus on positively, why would you avert your attention directly to the negative? And that's, I think, a mindset shift as opposed to anything else. Like we talked last time off air, didn't we, about because you've hurt your leg, haven't you? And that's a negative thing, but positives can come from negative things. You've now had more time to write and go on more podcasts. And although that is a negative side, there are the attention, as you said, the focus should be on, well, okay, we're in the situation we're in now anyway. What can we do to maximize his potential? And I think that's a really good mind shift and something that you're obviously trying to promote globally.
Yes. So there's a fabulous thought leader named Dr. Sweetkumar Rao, RAO. You can find his work through the Rao Institute. So he's one of the guests I had on the podcast, and he shared this amazing, very quick thought process with me that I've used every day since. So something happens, good or bad. This is really important that we apply it to the good things too. You have to say, this is good thing, bad thing, who knows? Because we all understand this. We've had terrible things happen to us that in the scope of time, we look back and say, oh my gosh, that turned out to be the best thing ever. But at the time, I responded to it as if it was the worst thing. So Dr. Rao's the wisdom of Dr. Rao's way of looking at the world is that you just when I fell and broke my leg, my kneecap blew up into 7 pieces, slipped on a piece of ice about a year ago, and I sat there on the ground, and like everyone, my first reaction was, oh, this changes everything. My legs bent backwards. It was terrible. But then I thought of Dr. Rao. Instantly I thought of Dr. Rao's, because I had trained myself to for my mind to go that way. I thought of Dr. Rao's wisdom, and just okay, pause, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And I went on about the day, ended up with surgery and all the terrible things for weeks. Um,
It sounds like
but in the
the
end,
horse
yes,
story.
you're right. In the end, it turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like the horse story, the good luck, bad luck story.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's
That's
funny because
and he
that's
does tell that story. Yeah.
yeah, the broken leg. It's uncanny to your situation actually in some respects.
Yeah. That it's pretty uncanny.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And it was forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward, just like in that story. And I think that the other wonderful thing about being the positive person in your circles or knowing more about the positive world is that, we are all looking at the world through a unique lens, very unique. We might be going through a divorce or a breakup. We may be having struggles with our 17-year-old. We may be whatever. And that is a unique lens from which we view everything else that happens to us. The negative news can make life feel hopeless or what have you. So if we're the positive person who knows more about the expanded version of reality, that's all that's all I'm talking about. I want to be really clear about this, Javon. I read the Wall Street Journal and New York Times every day. People try and put me out as this person with rose-colored glasses. I have a childhood tragedy that's just horrifying in my life. I am not unfamiliar with how bad the world is. I just know that there is so much good that isn't getting printed, isn't
yeah,
getting celebrated. And
yeah,
so it's our choice. And if you're the one in your circles that knows about Damien Mander, who's discovered that single mothers make the best game wardens in Africa, or if you're the one in your group that knows that Topher White's figured out how to save all the remaining rainforest with old cell phones, or on and on I could go. If you're that person, you're the one who's the idea person. You're the one who can influence others to see past the edges of their lens. And you can bring a lot of joy to other people's lives by being that person.
I like actually, it's like perfect timing really about the rose-colored spectacles, because while you were speaking, I actually wrote down a few things. And it was, well, what's the fine line really between being overly positive and delusional? Because as you said, you need to be aware of the threats that could happen.
Yes.
And is it a case of, again, a fine line between being uninformed and misinformed?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so true. So you can't pick and choose. This is the thing. If the only place you get your news is from social media, it is going to be tainted. Most of us know that, but we don't act like we know that, right? If you only get your news from one source, or you've got something constantly chiming in the background of your life from the TV or something, um your point of view is going to be like looking through a pinhole. And so I tell people to make sure that they get some news from many sources every day, and make sure it's pretty balanced. If someone's here's what would you like me to give you some tips about how I
Yeah,
watch or listen to the news?
absolutely.
Okay. So if I'm watching a news program on TV or on my computer, and I turn down the sound, and the person is and they're making all kinds of sounds and arm movements and facial expressions, it's clear they're trying to convince me of their point of view. Because people who are truly reporting the news are not interested in you sharing their opinion. That's how we get people. So, 60% of communication is body language and
Yeah.
facial expression. And that 60% is all the gesticulating and the angry faces and the huffing and the rolling of the eyes and the laughing at other people. All that, if you find that your news source is doing that, then they're not a news source. They're entertainment. They're an entertainment source. And you've got to keep that really clear in your mind. But if you can turn down the sound and the person is just a talking head and they're straight up and they're just making commentary like I am right now, they have no agenda. They're just telling you what happened. So that's how I judge where I get my news. If I decide that a single report or a particular reporter or a whole agency is constantly trying to shape my worldview in some way, I don't give my attention to them. Also, I read, for instance, I skim the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times every day, and I pick and choose. I'm very conscious. You mentioned it a few minutes ago. We cannot go to the internet or the newspaper or the news, whatever, on autopilot. We have to be very conscious and be present. Because, when you're doing the scrolling and clicking, you're on autopilot. And the part of your brain that's making your choices is called the amygdala. And it's the fear center of the brain. And it's the reason why you and I are here, Javon, and everyone listening to this, is because we have ancestors 30,000 years ago who were really good at listening to bad news. They stayed safe from saber-toothed tigers and evil groups of people across the valley because they listened hard for danger and disorder. Well, we don't have that anymore. Most of us do not have to worry about and be fearful of our lives. Not everyone, but most of us don't need to use that part of our brain, our amygdala, to decide what comes into our brain. We can pause, again, back to the pause. We can see that headline. And when I scan the headlines of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal every day, I take in, I'm very I'm very conscious of which things I'm choosing out of fear or that amygdala, kind of thing, and which I'm choosing out of curiosity or joy or what have you. So if you just stay present when you're reading the newspaper, you can make sure that you're getting yourself a balanced diet. Now, then there's us asking the newspapers to tell us more about what's right with the world.
Yeah. It's like you said a few moments ago, most people at the common sense level know that this is what the social media and the news is trying to do. But people say knowledge is power. It's not. Knowledge is not power. It's the application of knowledge which is power, which is what you're saying, and saying yes, yes. Most of you probably know that, but I'm giving you action steps and resources that are there to help you act upon what you already know to be true.
Yeah. There's a great one of the most important thinkers in climate change right now is named Paul Hawken. I interviewed him for the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. By the way, that's a beautiful interview. He's written the largest empirical plan for mitigating climate change in the world. Paul Hawken. If you put his name in the search box, it'll come up for pages and pages. So I was chatting with him, and he said the most amazing thing that fits right here. He says, and I have his quote up over here because I wanted to be able to talk. He says, "It's not belief that drives action. It's action that drives belief."
Love it.
See, most of us think it's that belief drives action. So if I believed it was a better world, I would then go seek out evidence for that. But that's not true. If you He says it's action that drives belief. So if you like working out, or just like any other good habits that you try and maintain, drinking lots of water, working out every day, blah blah blah. If you added seeking good news to part of your day, you would you would see just like that your action would drive your belief, and then you would believe that the world is a far better place than you do right now.
Yeah, I think it would probably go faith, action, belief, because belief for me, I spoke to someone on a podcast about this before. What's the difference between trust and faith? And I said that trust means that you have previous history. So if you trust someone to do something, you've more than likely got previous evidence of them doing that thing. So I could say, okay, Lynda, I trust that you're going to do a great talk because you've done it so a number of times on TEDx. If you have faith in someone, that's not necessarily based on prior experience, but you have faith that they will act on that. I think the action, as you said, comes before the belief, because you have had to act before the belief has sat in. Because faith and belief are different words with a very similar undertone, but not necessarily the direct connotations.
Yeah. There's a great statistic we just came across the other day. We've started offering subscription to the Goodness Exchange to businesses around the world that want to improve their work cultures. And one of the statistics that just left me astounded the other day was that there's a Harvard study, a woman, oh gosh, I can't begin to pronounce her last name, but she did this study where she found that just 4 minutes of exposure to positive news can make you 32% less anxious, and 12% more graceful. Now, think about moving the needle on your sense of well-being. 32% in just 4 minutes. I don't know another thing that you can do, and it's just sitting right there for us for the taking. um One of the ways I like to look at the difference between absorbing negative noise all day long or positive is sort of like, if you look at it like a diet. If you or I know anyone who just eats junk food all day long, we're going to kind of expect their whole person to be sort of a junk food sort of compilation. But if you know someone who watches what they eat and they try and eat one salad a day, and they don't treat themselves to soda all day long, they're going to be a different kind of person in the world. And that's exactly the way our news diet is. If you just can't break away from the negative news, make sure you're balancing it with as many salads, which is, there can be some delicious salads in the world too. So we've really got to look at our worldview like something we're feeding.
Yeah, it's something I try and do now in the morning. You mentioned the 4 minutes. Don't know how long it takes me exactly, but I write down a few things in the morning. The things I'm grateful for that I've got, the things I'm grateful for that will come true. So faith, affirmations, so positive self-talk, yeah, and then goals, the goals that I'm working towards. And those four things are all positive based, rather than what would normally happen is getting up in the morning, as you said, scrolling through your phone.
Right.
Oh, stock market's down. Oh no, negative thinking spirals.
Right.
Oh, someone got killed. Oh, negative spirals. Messages about you need to get this done, your work emails, please.
Right.
And you're starting off your day with thinking about problems. The rest of the day, as you said, then follows suit. Whereas if you just spend the 4 minutes, whether it's the goodness exchange, whether it's the gratitude, whether it's listening to something motivational, whatever it's going to be, something that's going to put you in that positive mind state will give you a better day, and a better day will give you a better week, and a better week will give you a better life. So what you're saying here is that just very small changes can give tangibly better results. And as you said, you've seen that throughout the people that listen to the podcast and obviously follow the exchange itself.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the future is not something that happens, it's something we create. And what we do today determines our tomorrow. It just, so, that's the rationale for eating better, making sure we exercise here and there, and making sure we have loving relationships. We're putting our energy towards that instead of work, work, work. All those things. I just don't hear enough people talking about worldview. And I guess that's what I'm the champion for is us caring as much about our worldview as we do about our hair and our nails and our waistline and the rest of
Yeah.
it.
No, I think you're right. It's important to have a good overall view because it's like the Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you know Viktor Frankl, the
Oh, sure, of course.
but essentially, he's locked up and uh, he derived meaning, which meant that even if you put him in the worst possible position, he didn't go mental because he
That's right.
had a sense of meaning, had a sense of purpose, has a positive viewpoint, even in a negative situation. And if that doesn't show some evidence to what you're saying, I don't really know what does, because we're not in as bad a situation as that, and he didn't really feel as bad as what he could have done. So again, as you said a number of times, what you focus on expands. What your thoughts are, things. What we think about is really important. If you're going to start, I'll use an example myself. If you're going to start a business and you look at the things that could go wrong, I could lose my house, I could lose my car, could lose all my money. I'm basically giving up a guaranteed income for potentially nothing, etc., etc., etc. You're probably not going to start the business. But if you start the business with the positive standpoint of, well, what if it goes well? Look, all the people I can serve, I'll be able to employ people and help them build their families. And you look at it in that respect, you're probably likely to spend, the time to start the business. And I think what you're saying as well is that just reading the news or consuming positive information is likely to make you act in a better way that then will give you stronger belief in humans being good people, essentially, which again
Yeah.
works as a conveyor belt and a revolving door.
It changes our day-to-day decisions. The best example I've been using for a while, I probably need to update it, but we had 3 children in college when the pandemic hit. So my husband and I had been empty nesters for exactly 4 months. And then one by one, they all came back from spring break with their significant other, and their schools told them never to come back. So that's how they handle it in the United States. Colleges decided that there wouldn't be any students on campus. So we had suddenly our household went from 2 to 8. And every day we had a choice in many situations. You can imagine the opportunities for friction there. I could tell you some very funny stories about smelling strange smells from my son's bedroom and deciding not to confront him about that,
Was it the
etc.,
the Sweet Mary Jane
etc.
by any chance?
Uh, well, I don't know, maybe, but we live in Vermont, which is the cannabis capital of the United States, so maybe.
Yeah.
But every day, we had to cook these meals all of a sudden together. Everybody had to pitch in somewhere in that process, or we'd get aggravated, right? Like there were so many small decisions. And here's something that I wanted to share with you that I found had us through the whole 2.5 years we lived together like that. Um, is this idea of being kinder than you need to be. Not being kind. You know how everybody's doing this big thing on be kind? I love that. Of course, I love be kind. But I think being kinder than you need to be makes all of us raise our game. one time I was in a conversation with my brother, who's a former F-15 fighter pilot. He's very straightforward about things. And he wanted to have some kind of confrontation with the neighbor on the family farm. And I said, Alex, you have to be kinder than you need to be, or we could lose this neighborly relationship. And he goes, I am being kind. Okay. How many times are we? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
How many times are we looking at our situation and we're thinking this is all I can do, or that this is the best I can do. When if we looked at the situation like, okay, here I am with my kindness, my ability to be kindness about my son or somebody not helping with the dishes or whatever it is day to day, a coworker who's left his stuff all over my shared office, whatever. What is being kinder than you need to be look like? And that raises all of our games up in our day-to-day decisions. And we can do that on the internet too. We can decide what to share and what not to. We can decide what to chime in on and or not to. I just I don't add to anything that makes my blood boil ever.
Yeah.
Um, I am always trying to be kinder than I need to be. I'm assuming the best intentions of others. Those are all good habits that make our day-to-day lives roll forward in the small decisions to create better tomorrows.
I love that because there is a success principle essentially that says something very similar, where it says, do more than what you're paid for, and you will then start getting paid more than what you're doing. Basically, it's like if you work somewhere and you're doing more than you're being paid for, there'll come a time where you'll move up the ladder and actually you'll be getting paid more than what you're doing. And it's like
Right.
that, if you're being kinder than you need to be, it will come to a point where the scales will reverse, and
Yes.
actually you'll be treated better than you deserve to be in some respects, because you've actually given all that positivity out there in the first place.
Well, the same is true of leadership as well. And I think being positive and knowing about a world that's positive is about leadership. But the old thing where, well, I'll start acting like I'm a leader once they give me a leadership role.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's not how it works, right? The reason why you get the leadership role, you get asked to move up in the company, is because you demonstrated that kind of leadership ahead of time. The same is true of knowing more about the world of innovation, which obviously falls in the category of positive news. I'll tell you, if there was one practical reason, one, and nobody, if you didn't care about your worldview at all, you just wanted to make it in the world faster, be the idea person. Know what other people are doing that's innovation and moving us all forward faster than we ever imagined. Because almost all the innovators that I've ever interviewed or written articles about, they were inspired by someone else. And it gave them some little piece of the puzzle in their own unique mind and their own experience set to come up with some fantastic idea in their world. So if there was a reason to dive into positive news, or at least the kind of well, at least the kind of articles that we cover, people who are really coming up with solutions to some of the world's greatest problems, if there was ever a reason to do that, that's super selfish, but good for everyone at the same time, it's that once you know so much more about ideas and change makers, your own mind will start coming up with ideas in your world that make everyone around you feel super lucky.
Yeah, well, you have to give value first, don't you? Going back to your point a minute ago, value first, and then things come beyond that. It's not like, oh, yeah, I need to be paid first to then become a leader and a good employee. If you were to
Right.
give $1 million idea to your boss, and that was implemented and they made the £1 million, do you not think that you would get paid more?
Right.
You have to do that first. It's not like, and you hear this all the time, a negative attitude. Oh, if I was getting paid 100 grand, I'd work harder as well. It's like, no, you have to do that prior to receiving anything. And it's like the positive news situation, like you said. Here's a question then. So you've obviously been operating on the goods exchange for a while. What are your top few stories that inspired you the most? Whether that's recent to keep it current, or whether that's historic.
I love the stories large and small. I'd love to share stories large and small. Okay, I've already mentioned two really large ones. Damian Mander, Jane Goodall is on his board. He's figured out that single mothers make the best game wardens in Africa. That is such a game changer in places in Africa that need to find a way to weave in surrounding communities with the protection of wildlife and natural parks. But on the small scale, it's just as important. There's a wonderful woman that we wrote an article about in Detroit who was lucky enough, you know how city blocks sometimes have internal gardens. She had such a great garden, such an abundant garden that she couldn't possibly go through all this vegetables, these vegetables that were being produced. And yet it was a food desert. The area where she lived, that's what we call areas in the United States that have no grocery stores. So what did she do? She got an old secondhand refrigerator, put it out on the street in front of her apartment building, ran the cord up through the window, and then she just put a sign on the front, free food. And so whenever she had leftover or garden produce, she just put it in there and people would come by and take it. And there was no shame attached to it. Oh, you look in the freezer today, you're walking the fridge by and you see a zucchini and you can make something of it. Then local restaurants started to add to the fridge, and then she had to put out two fridges. And then people started giving and taking from it, and it just became a community resource that changed everybody's sense about who each other is, right?
Yeah, in a way, those smaller stories, not that there's any hierarchy between big and small stories, but sometimes those small stories are more personable and they are,
Mhm.
in a sense, more inspiring because it's like
Mhm.
it's so relatable. Like you're at home, you've got some stuff, you get your fridge and put it out on the front door, and it's that, as I said, there's no hierarchy, and there's no sort of score taking, let's say, for how big something is. But those ones are really, really inspiring for me.
There's a woman, I could also, I really think it's important as we each find what we're uniquely built to contribute. It's a little bit of a detour, but I should say I think that um, the great, what do they call it? The great resignation that went on during the pandemic. So many people quit their jobs. I've been calling that the great questioning all along because I think that's what people did. They During the pandemic, they had time to pause and say, whoa, wait, if I work for this crazy guy for another 5 years, where will I be? Or if I do this thing that's meaningless, where will I be? So people paused and then they questioned, what they're uniquely built to contribute. Well, that is factors into this world of good work and good news and people that are doing extraordinary things. For instance, there's a woman who loved dogs, and she had a particular knack known by all her friends and family for handling really bad dogs. So she was constantly adopting bad dogs, and eventually she started this whole movement that instead of calling dogs bad dogs, just recognizing that some dogs were task oriented and other dogs were people oriented. We always like the dogs that are just waiting, looking at us, wagging their tail, waiting for our next command, right? Well, she discovered that these dogs that are considered bad dogs very often are just task related dogs. And she's discovered how to train these dogs to do all kinds of amazing things. Like here in the United States, she's trained dogs to figure out where invasive species are. Like for instance, in a national park or a state park, there might be some horrible plant that's just taking over everything. Well, she can train these bad dogs because they're task masters on themselves to sniff out, and so they can kill every single invasive plant there is, or an area where they might be worried that the very last rabbit of a certain kind is left. They can train these dogs to find those last few birds or rabbits so that we can save them.
Yeah,
And on and on it goes.
it's a bit
Sniffing.
like it's a bit like the kids situation at school. Sometimes those naughty kids aren't naughty. It's because
Yes,
they are not challenged and they need something interesting, like a task, like you say, to do. It's not they
yes,
aren't people
yes.
pleasers. They aren't goody two shoes. They need something to focus and they need to be in charge of their own ship. So maybe that's a situation there. But sometimes as well with the COVID, and I think I underwent what you said as well, the great questioning,
Mhm.
because we're so fast running on, or we're running so fast on the hamster wheel, we get very little time to reflect on where we are and sit back down. And solitude, I'm a great advocate of solitude. Loneliness is where you want company, but you can't get company because for whatever reason you're not really sought after in that respect. Solitude is a voluntary action. And when you're in solitude, you have no distractions and you can actually think about where you are and what you want. And I'm definitely in agreement with you. I think there was a massive shift change of people saying, well, do I want to do this forever? You know, whether COVID was real or not, let's just skip that aside for the minute. You know, some people might have had the thought that, you know, what if I was going to die tomorrow? Is this how I wanted to live my life? And maybe that was also an impetus for change.
But I think also, and all that is absolutely true. And I think we all want to serve. Can we talk a minute about service to others?
Yeah, love it.
So I've really noticed this is part of my being a part of thousands of people's lives as a dentist. My husband and I are both dentists in this little farming town in Vermont, about an hour south of Montreal. And we've really built the practice so he and I have time to chat with people, just chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting all day long. And so, one of the things that we learned from that is that people are happiest when they feel like they belong, like they're contributing something that only they are built to contribute. And we found that the people that are the happiest are always connected in some way to serving others. It may be a part of their job, like the nurse who can't wait to go to work, or the teacher that's still holding on and still sees 28 shining eyes looking back at her. You know, not every teacher or every nurse can be inspired like that these days, but you know what I'm talking about. The people who really seem to have found their niche. We all know them in our lives. Very often there is an aspect of service to others in these people that are the happiest. They feel a sense of belonging. They feel like they matter. They feel like they're in a two-way um, they're a two-way relationship that's deep and meaningful with others. And I'm really encouraging people to think about making sure that there's an active aspect of service in their lives. If you're unhappy, it may be because you you haven't found what you're uniquely built to contribute to the lives of others. And I know
Yeah,
that sounds kind of woo woo, but it's really not.
it's
Just
not.
knowing thousands of people, those are the happiest.
You can use business examples as well. You know, you have to be able to serve others. A lot of people are materialistic and they focus on money, but even if you look at the fundamentals of business, you have to serve others in order to generate income.
Mhm.
Walmart or the taxi service, you're serving someone else. You're allowing someone to get from destination to destination B. You're allowing someone to just come into the shop and buy goods and services, whatever that's going to be. And I think that should be a focus of in people's lives is providing service, providing value to others. Everything else is secondary. And that should be the focus, that should be the purpose, and that should be the focus of your actions. And the byproduct of that is feeling good, getting compliments, being valued.
Yeah.
And that's in itself its own currency, isn't it?
Yeah. Have you ever seen, like, gone through an airport and seen, I remember specifically the person that taught me this was a TSA agent. Oh, airline travel was becoming so excruciating right before the pandemic. Everybody was so crabby and it was just awful. And there was this TSA agent in Amsterdam that we were passing through, and he was hilarious. He was cracking jokes. It was like he was doing a stand-up routine in the middle of one of those long back and forth and back and forth. And you could tell that he was passionate about what he was doing. He knew he was serving others to get us all through there faster. And every question that somebody asked all full of emotion, he would diffuse it and be helpful. It was just a thing of beauty to watch someone who really looked at their job from the angle of service to others. Now, there's two ways to look at that job. You can just say, ugh, I'm having to deal with all these wacky travelers right now. Or you can say, I get the privilege of helping all these travelers right now, right? Like, that's our choice every day in our jobs.
Language is so important. It's not, you know,
It is.
I get to be able to do this, I can do this, rather than I can't do this or I have to do this. I think that
Yes.
the language change, as you said there, is a massive thing, and it changes your whole perspective. And as you've said right at the start, you know, the positive language, the positive information has that effect on us as well, doesn't it? Is there anything you would want to sort of talk about that we've not talked about, whether it's the TEDx talks, whether it's the book, or something else that you feel that we've not yet covered?
Well, you know, my book is a compilation. It's called Happiness is an Option. Um, and it's a compilation of all the things that the thought leaders I've interviewed and written about over the years have taught me. And so, if it also it goes into the four shifts quite nicely. But um, I think that it's part of this seeking signs of goodness and progress. There's a lovely, oh, I know what I would really love to share with you. We talk a lot at the Goodness Exchange about a conspiracy of goodness in our times right now. I mean, we really think that's what's happening. Don't forget what a conspiracy is. It starts with sort of an underground, quiet coming together of people. And, we can have a conspiracy of goodness as much as we have all the other conspiracies that people want to promote. We can look around us and see all the people making small choices quietly that are adding up right now. I always like to tell people there is an enormous wave of goodness and progress well underway in the world, but we just don't know about it yet. And this conspiracy of goodness is just not showing up in the news for a couple of reasons, Javon. Remember, news is only newsworthy if it's rare. We don't hear about all the airplanes that landed today that did just fine, got people on time, was all safe. We only hear about the one that was a near miss or a crash, right? And we got to keep reminding our minds that all this negativity that we're watching is only newsworthy because it's so rare.
I love it.
And the vast majority of people out there, of work and all the things that are going on in our lives, the vast majority of it is really good, but it's not newsworthy because of that.
It's true. Like
So I
like you
want to
said, like the
share with you.
accident, like the car
Go
situation. Like
ahead.
for every 100,000 cars that drive on the road today, 99,999 of those will get home to their families okay. But it's the one that has the accident that's all over the news. You're not, oh, cars are so dangerous.
Yes, yes, yes. And um, and the secret, the the hidden nature of all this goodness that I'm pointing to, is really what we have to work on in between our ears in this beautiful computer brain we have. We have to say, yes, that bad thing happened, and there were millions of good things that happened that I'm not hearing about. And that goes into, let me share the story of the actual story of the conspiracy of goodness with you, because I think it's a nice way to wrap up and might leave people with some hope. I do have a TED talk called Exposing the Conspiracy of Goodness. So if this story lands on you, well, look up Exposing the Conspiracy of Goodness on the internet and you'll see that. So here's the story. Um, I was I was interviewing an amazing thought leader who's in the sporting world and using sports to teach kids goodness at a young age. And he was listening to what I told him about the goodness exchange. He said, "Oh, Dr. Lynda, you know about the conspiracy of goodness, don't you? The story from World War II." And I said, "No." And he goes, "Oh, it's exactly what you're doing." He told me there was a little village called Le Chambon, France, that managed to save 3,000 lives, most of them children, from a nearby Nazi concentration camp. And there was a Rabbi Harold Schulweis who was giving a lecture in Europe after World War II. And the lecture he called The Conspiracy of Evil. And he tells a great story of an old man standing up in the back of the room after one of his lectures. And the old man said that he was one of the rescuers, one of the people who had saved a whole family, a whole Jewish family. And the old man said, "Do you think I could have saved this entire family without the help of the milkman, the mailman, and the neighbors?" "No," he said. "For every one person saved, there were seven who were rescuers. It was a conspiracy of goodness." So that's the first time I can find reference the phrase conspiracy of goodness on the internet. And when you really think about what that farmer was saying, he was saying, no, look, we all got to come together here. We probably are together in certain ways, and we're each part of a cog that can create a shared future that's beautiful or not. But we have to step up and be conscious of our role, whatever it might be, and do it.
Love it, love it. I think, as you said, there's always more goodness and people involved than you think of. And what comes to mind is there's a film, I can't remember the name of the film now, about a little girl who was dying of some sort of bowel cancer, and she got cured at the end. But what happened at the end of the film was they showed you all of the little people who did their little part to help her get
Yes.
cured. And when you watch the film for the first time, well, sorry, you watch the film and you've not got to the last 10 or 15 minutes where it shows you all those people and what they did to make everything happen. You just think, oh, it happened. But when you actually look at it from the other perspective, it's amazing. And yes, it's a film, but it still shows you really how to think in the grand scheme of things, in terms of how the world operates as well.
Yes, I'm looking over here again. There, I just got off the phone before this interview with somebody I'm going to interview for my podcast, The Conspiracy of Goodness. And he is managing this amazing global effort to reduce plastic waste. It's mind blowing how big this thing is. And he said something that might be lovely for you. We, our direct impact is visible to us, but not our indirect impact, right? That's the point of the movie that you just referred to. We seem to keep measuring ourselves only on the compliments we get, or the likes we get, or the shares, or what, all these direct things that we can see. But he points out that the bigger picture, the indirect things that are happening because of our way in the world, are far more valuable, and they will go out over the scope of time and change the future for everyone. And I thought that was super empowering for folks that are trying to get started doing something good in the world, finding what they're uniquely built to contribute. He also said something that I thought was lovely. He said, never lose the ability to fall in love with problems, even the small ones.
Love it. Because problems are really opportunities, aren't they?
That's exactly how it is. And we all can
Apart,
influence them in some way, large or small.
apart from if you have an alcohol problem, it's not an alcohol opportunity.
Right. Well, yeah. And yet, maybe it's an opportunity to learn more compassion for us. I mean, like, you're gonna if you push me, Devon, I can find opportunity in almost anything.
Yeah, wait, I'm the same. I've taken a long time to program my mind to, regardless of how bad things are, from losing your job, for example, and reprogramming your mind, or looking at the positive, saying, well, now I can find a job that's closer to home with better pay, with better benefits that I actually enjoy doing, instead of
Yes.
what's just happened. Relationship, you finish a relationship. Yes, you said that it ended, but I now know what I like in a partner and can go out and find them, and it's going to be exciting again. So there's always something. It doesn't matter how bad things are. There's always something positive to come from it.
And that, if you start with a really open mind, can I tell you one last story of good news that relates
Absolutely,
exactly to what you just said? See
absolutely.
how you indicated this transition, one thing led to another, to another, to another. There's this absolutely amazing story of good news that I just interviewed the head person on. It's a group in Africa that's learned that the great pouched rats of Africa have this. They're, first of all, they're incredibly smart, and they have literally changed the whole country of Mozambique to a mine-free zone. They train the
Really?
rats to sniff out, because Mozambique went through a terrible
Yeah, yeah.
war about 15 years ago. There was farmers that there's so many people lost limbs because they just want to go out and farm their own farm, and they don't know that there's a landmine buried there. So that's the backstory. But anyway, they've realized that these rats can be easily trained. They're super long lived, so it makes the training valuable, and they can cover the surface of a field in short order and never set off the landmines, but indicate where they are, and that's that. Okay, so that would be good enough, right? Train rats to find landmines. How good is that? But no, then they found out that they can detect tuberculosis in
Wow.
about a quarter of a second by smelling tuberculosis samples. So now they're discovering tuberculosis all over this part of Africa, just like that, with these samples rather than elaborate medical tests. All right, then when the Turkish earthquake happened, didn't those folks call up and say, is there anything that these rats can do? Well, turns out you can put little backpacks on them, and these rats are incredible at going into rubble after earthquakes, after natural disasters, and finding survivors. It's it's breathtaking how one good thing leads to another in our lives, in our everyday lives, like you indicated, but also in innovation and the way we think about what's possible in the companies that we work for. We can have that same kind of next and next and next mentality. And it becomes kind of like this necklace. This necklace is a Tetris game. You know how Tetris works?
I was thinking, I
That
looked at that earlier. I was contemplating whether it was Sudoku or some sort of Tetris. Yeah.
Yeah, it Tetris. You can actually pay Tetris on this. And I wear it quite often to remind me about the conscious choices we have. You don't sit down in front of a Tetris game and think about your relationship problems or your what's on. You don't try and play Tetris and do social media, do you? You you got to be present. You got to think about things consciously. Imagine what's next or what may come. And that's the way we can think of our lives in relationship to seeking good news and sharing it.
Love it. It's definitely a snowball effect, isn't it? In either direction. And it's better to be on the positive side of the snowball than on the negative.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where can people reach out to you? Obviously, you've talked about the podcast and the Goodness Exchange.
Yeah.
Is there any other suggestions of where people can reach you and
Yeah.
resources they can use?
Well, I am pretty good about getting back to every single person that contacts us through the Goodness Exchange. We have quite a system of being very, very responsive. So if you just go to the contact us line on the Goodness Exchange, I will get any message that you send me. Um, as I said, the book is very empowering. I get messages almost every day from people who come across the book. Happiness is an option. And if you just want a quick reminder once in a while about what's possible, that TED Talk, Exposing the Conspiracy of Goodness, is a lovely thing to drop into periodically. It's only 13 minutes long, but it gives you the big picture on how you're in charge of what happens next in your life. So yeah, if people want to get a hold of me, I do a lot of public speaking. I love to be the moderator in meetings because I'm so naturally curious and I have a knack with bringing out the best in people. So yeah, I my life is in service to others, and I'm serving the wider world in any way I can to get ideas and innovation that can help us all have a shared future to rise to the top.
Love it. I'll put the links on the notes for the show,
Yes.
so people can click on there. But thanks
Yeah.
very much for being a
Yeah.
guest, Lynda. You've
Yeah.
I'm a positive person anyway, but some of the stories today, I'll probably end up thinking about those later on tonight because things that happen during the day you tend to think of later on in the day, and I'm going to think about that refrigerator example and the rat example, and sit there and
Yes.
think, yeah, do you know what?
Up there.
The world's
It
even more amazing than I thought this morning.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, you can dive into any episode on the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. Javon, we don't, we're random. We're so random. Um, and think, oh, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that. These folks that are carrying on in the world in a way that will change the future for us all, they're fascinating, ordinary people. We have lovely conversations. Sometimes we just need that spring in our step again. And so that's where you can get it is that the Goodness Exchange or the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast.
Definitely check it out, and thanks again for being on the show.
All right. Thanks so much.